Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword, your YouTube home for The Lord of the Rings and all things J.R.R. Tolkien. In today's video, we are looking at the question, why didn't Sauron turn invisible when wearing the One Ring?
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
First things first, do not forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more future Tolkien greatness. So, the easy answer to this is that Sauron, being a Maya, exists already in the Wraith world, or the Unseen World as it is also known. Therefore, he would not be affected by the ring in the same way we see other beings who wear the ring be affected. Another reason that might be more complicated would be that rather than sapping the strength of Sauron in the way it sapped the strength of Frodo or Bilbo by spreading him thin,
sort of stretched like butter scraped over too much bread.
The ring doesn't do this to Sauron. It contains much of what makes him such a terrible and cunning enemy inside of it.
And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life.
One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. When Gandalf first lets Frodo in on the secret of why he has been so suspicious, coming and going for those long 17 years which separate the end of Bilbo's stay in the Shire and Frodo's departure for Buckland, we get a longer narrative that informs us of what Smeagol's character was like prior to his possession of the ring and his murder of his close relative, Deagol. What we learned about Smeagol was that prior to his taking of the ring, he was already crossing boundaries, digging into mounds, into the root of trees, and diving into deep pools. All of this behaviour is transgressive in Hobbit society, especially that of digging into mounds of roots and, in a sense, killing those trees. And it is possible this is Gandalf's way of telling Frodo that prior to Smeagol becoming Gollum, he was not as the hobbits of the Shire in Frodo's time were, nor even the relations of the Stores who lived by the Anduin in the time of Smeagol. Basically, he was a bit of an outsider anyway. He gradually came to hate the very face of the sun, shaking his fist at the light as he made his way into the Lonely Mountain. He used the powers of the ring to learn secrets, to spy on others, and potentially to blackmail his fellow Stores. The great matron of his clan drove him out of the community, and in a vivid image, as Gandalf puts it, Gollum bit at their feet while they kicked and punched at his stomach. The difference between Bilbo and Smeagol is not as great as Bilbo or Frodo would like to believe, and Gandalf is keen on pointing this out to Frodo. It is important to note, we are looking at the effects it had on someone who was already less than scrupulous. He intended to use the ring for his own purposes, not necessarily to undo the coming of the second shadow that was to cover the lands in a second darkness. When we learn this information from Gandalf, we've already been privy to the lengths to which he needed to go to convince Bilbo to go through with the entirety of his plan, to leave the ring behind, give it to Frodo and go and stay with the elves. It must be again said for the sake of Bilbo's honour and integrity, of all known ring-bearers to have claimed the ring for their own, he was and remains the only being to relinquish the ring of his own accord after having held it for an extended period of time, turning it over to Frodo, his heir. Yes, you had the likes of Gandalf touching it for a moment in Bag End, or Tom Bombadil flicking it around, but they are just moments, not days, weeks, or even months. The effect the ring has on a mortal being appears to be uniform, considering only their moral fortitude as buffers against the corruptive powers inherent in the ring itself. We know from Sam's experiences in the book that his hearing and senses are amplified when wearing the ring, to make the equivalent point for what it might do to an immortal Maya spirit, whose senses are already enhanced beyond the understanding of mortal men, hobbits, or monsters beneath the misty mountains. It is hard to overstate the extent to which Sauron's natural and unnatural powers are heightened and further realized by his wearing of the ring. He does not turn invisible because he exists in both worlds already. the seen and the unseen, as we have hints that few other characters do as well. Characters such as the enigma that is Tom Bombadil, who also does not turn invisible when wearing the ring or playing with it, and a man who is brought up as a serious contender against the will of Sauron by Glorfindel at the Council of Elrond. And for those of you who don't know, he is rejected because he basically wouldn't care enough about it to follow everything through. He might just lose the ring, as how little he cares of it. But if anyone would like to see a dedicated video to the differences at the Council of Elrond in the book versus what happens in the Peter Jackson movies, then please leave us a comment of, right, where are we going? And we will get working on that for you all, because it is such a big chapter in the book and had to get cut down dramatically for the movies. We also know that the ring would have worked terrible sorcery through the deeds of Gandalf, which is why he kept himself at some distance from the ring as a whole. It is more likely that not that Gandalf would not turn invisible if he were to wear the ring, although there is some debate about this. We know that he remained visible while wearing the ring once given to him by Círdan, for example, being Narya, the Ring of Fire. Although obviously, the Elven rings are in no way close to the power of the One Ring and do not have the same powers within them either. So it's only really worth a quick mention. Of which, by the way, if you don't know, there were 3 Elven Rings of Power, with the other 2 being named Vilya, the Ring of Air, and Nenya, the Ring of Water, and we have videos discussing those rings if you would like to learn more about them. But if we now look at a moment from when Galadriel and Frodo are by the mirror of Galadriel in Lothlorien, she mentions in passing the effect that these rings had. They kept away the decay of time and allowed them to remain in Middle-earth long past the moment of their natural passing, making their usage of the rings closer in form and function to the rings worn by the 9 kings of men who were later transformed into the Nazgul. And she points out that with the destruction of the One Ring, their own rings of power would lose their effect on their lands. And so, this just emphasizes they cannot really be compared in the same way, as their effects and the effects of the One Ring are just not the same. But anyway, throughout The Lord of the Rings, we get the impression that anyone who wants to take the ring is usually not fitting to do so, and that after looking at Gandalf quickly, we can also now consider Saruman if he was ever able to take the ring. As the voice of Saruman says when the Nazgul approach him, were he in possession of that ring which they so seek, they would not need to ask him about it. Rather, they would be throwing themselves at his feet and naming him Lord. Again, no evidence to say that he would turn invisible or not, I guess, and as we kind of touched upon earlier, this really comes down to him being Maya, not a mortal being. And also again, for those of you who don't know, the Maiar are spirits that help the Valar, with the main ones we know being Sauron, Gandalf, Saruman, and Radagast amongst others. Now their thing is that they do not really have physical bodies, although they could take physical shapes while in Middle-earth. Therefore, the One Ring's ability to shift beings into the Wraith world from the physical world is a pointless thing. As we mentioned at the beginning, they exist in both. This really means that Sauron could turn himself invisible to the human eye anytime he wanted, and the One Ring did not have any impact on this. Only when another wore the One Ring could they then see him within this other world, with the main example we get from The Lord of the Rings being how Frodo saw Glorfindel at the Ford of Bruinen after being stabbed by the Witch King, as a being like Glorfindel, being one of the elves that had seen the light of the 2 trees, could exist in both at the same time, just like the Maiar. So although we have kept saying invisible, I guess technically that is not quite correct. Instead of turning invisible, it's almost more of a shift into a different dimension. But that doesn't change our answer. So there we have it at the end of all this, having a look at the effects of other rings, comparing them to the One Ring, as well as others of the Order of the Maiar, or even the Elves as well. It all comes down to that Sauron was able to exist in both the seen and unseen world simultaneously. When the Maiar came to Middle-earth, they would take on a physical form, as in their natural state, a physical form is not something they needed. There were rumours that Gandalf, before he was known as Gandalf, walked among the elves unseen, just to watch their ways. So there is no reason to think any other one of the Maiar could not do the same. Albeit, when the Istari are sent as the wizards, they are sent in weakened forms to help the fight against Sauron. So I'm really just talking about their true Maiar forms here. At the end of the day, Sauron was a pure spirit, purposely taking on each form that he did, and they are products of his own will. He was a master of both realms, and so the One Ring did not turn him invisible by simply putting it on. With that now though, it is time for my question of the day, which is Sauron the greatest villain in Tolkien's world? Does Melkor take the crown even though he is less well known? Or maybe someone closer to home like Lotho Sackville Baggins is the true greatest villain? Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section below. And now to shout out our patrons. You guys have been incredible in supporting our short film, and we cannot thank you enough. We have the Divine Power tier members of Kevin and Abram, the Fire Demon tier members of Nishith and Gregory, and the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew, Jennifer, Hunter, and David too. Every single one of you is a true legend of the Brohirrim. Finally, if you have managed to reach the end of the video with me today and you are enjoying what you see on the channel, please hit that subscribe button with the bell icon too, so that you can be notified of all future uploads. And so, thank you for spending just some of your time with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.